Welcome back to Starting Six, a volleyball podcast with Haley and Liv. This is episode 5 already, and today we're going to do a couple recaps of some news around the volleyball world, and then we're going to get into our personal recruiting process from high school to college. So we're excited to revisit those. I was thinking about it today, and it was like 7 years ago already or something that I was starting doing all that, which, well, I guess the whole process is probably like 8 now, but that made me feel a little old and nervous that I would forget some stuff. So hopefully I can dig deep and pull those memories back up what that looked like. So to kick it off just right away, because we kind of have a lot to talk about today, the game I want to choose to recap is Penn State versus Athletes Unlimited. So Liv and I mentioned being excited for this game when it was announced, because Penn State is making their comeback. I think Liv was unfortunately not being able to watch it because her sister's bachelorette. Yay, Lauren! But I was able to tune in, and Penn State looked great. And this, again, keeping in mind that this is without the transfers that we had noted earlier. There's a couple players I just wanted to touch on really quick. Starting off, number 17, 5th year, super senior, we're not quite sure, Zoe Weatherington. She's a 6'2" right side. She is one of the most powerful hitters I've ever watched in college. I remember watching her in previous years and being like, wow. But I mean, I wasn't following Penn State as closely as other teams, but when I tuned into this game, I was like, yeah, I remember that. I remember her. You could just tell that she was a common go-to, like her setters and even like liberos with second balls. You could just tell they trusted her to get the job done. And she played really well off the block, which I thought was really notable. And again, I think that comes with being older. Like I mentioned, on the roster, she's a senior plus. So I'm not 100% sure what that means. We're assuming she's gonna have a grad year, but you can just tell, you can see her maturity on the court. And the next one I wanted to mention was number 19, sophomore Alex Markley. She's a 6'2" outside. She had a great defensive and offensive game. She just looked, I don't know if she played it all last year, assuming she's a true sophomore this year. So I'm assuming probably not a ton. But she looked very strong, and she had very good composure. She had a good blocking game, a lot of defense off the 10-foot line, which is a challenge for outsides, or maybe just me, but it was a challenge. And then the last one's number 20, true senior Allie Holland. She's a 6'3" middle. She led the team in blocks, both with assists and solos. She looked, I mean, these Athletes Unlimited hitters, they're so knowledgeable on hitting around the block, hitting off the block. I mean, and when she was blocking, like, she was stuff blocking. So just 3 notable players. Again, these are girls who have been with Penn State for many years. These don't include any of the transfers. So to have 3 different positions be so strong, and then just going to be adding to that when transfers get to campus, is super exciting. Another thing sorry.
You're good. I was just saying, I'd love to hear that.
I'm just reading off my list, so I'm like, check. The other couple, just 2 things I wanted to mention quick, and then I'll read the scores off. They had a pretty large attendance. These Athletes Unlimited games have been iffy on attendance, but this one had a pretty good attendance in Happy Valley, which was nice to see. You could hear it on the live stream too, which I think makes a little bit of a difference. And then just something I really thought was cool, I'm sure you saw this, there were 2 Athletes Unlimited players that are alumni of Penn State. It's Alicia Glass-Childress and Deja McLendon. Deja's the bald woman. She's a phenomenal pin hitter. Those 2 girls swapped after the first set and actually put on Penn State jerseys and played with Penn State. Aww. And then after the game, they were awarded their original jerseys with their numbers from when they played there.
That's so cool.
So there was a video, and Deja, when she was running out in the Penn State jersey, she had the biggest smile on her face. She was so happy and so excited. And then everyone there who probably have never even seen her play, it's been so long, or giving this huge round of applause. And it was just a really cool thing to see. And I thought it was awesome of both the Penn State coaches and players to let them have this experience, because it's probably, I mean, I'm going to assume it's the first time playing in that gym, playing in a Penn State jersey since graduating.
Yeah, that's so cool. It's just so cool how they respect those alumni there. You know, like some teams, some coaches may be like, oh, well, you weren't my player. It was a long time ago. They might not have that connection with that alumni, but seeing that they don't necessarily have it, but they still give them the attention and the love and the respect, I think that's so cool.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, because we kind of saw it a little bit with Sydney Hilly's return to the field house, but I feel like that was more the fans kind of, not saying that Kelly Sheffield wasn't or the girls wasn't, but like you could hear it in that the fans, because it was so new. So it was cool to see on the flip side the organization. And again, this coach wasn't their coach. Exactly. So it's cool to see the organization as a whole take that step to do that for them. I thought was really awesome. So just to run through what the scores ended up being. So Athletes Unlimited took set 1, 25-22. Penn State took set 2 and 3, 25-20, 25-21. And then Athletes Unlimited took set 4, 25-23. So it was a very competitive match. I thought Penn State looked really good.
That's awesome. That's so exciting.
Yeah, it's just like, oh, just one of those things. And honestly, like any big, like, because we're so into watching Big Ten teams, knowing there's gonna be really good competition means there's gonna be really good games. So it's just kind of like a giddy, like exciting feeling. Then the last housekeeping thing we just want to run through really quick. Nebraska has put out more information about what's being called Volleyball Day in Nebraska.
Nebraska is a volleyball school, everyone. Yes, Nebraska is a volleyball school.
This is just so, it's iconic. It really is. Like the fact that Lincoln is so on board with just making it Volleyball Day. Yeah. It's not the Cornhuskers versus Omaha. It's Volleyball Day, period.
I love it.
So as we kind of, I don't even know if we've actually mentioned this, but back in February, Nebraska announced with a very well-produced video that they're going to be playing a game in late August in Memorial Stadium, which is where their football team plays. This, as far as I know, has never been done before.
I don't think so.
In college, I've never heard of this. So this match is set to take place versus Omaha on Wednesday, August
30th, I think.
30th. I have 7th, and I was like, that's not right. 30th, yeah, that sounds right. At 7:00 p.m. at Memorial Stadium. So this is actually really cool. So they're doing a doubleheader. So the first game is going to be played by Nebraska at Kearney, and they're going to play Wayne State in an exhibition match at 4:30. And then the Nebraska and Omaha will play afterwards. And then following that, it hasn't been announced who, but there's going to be a concert as well for people. So this is like a whole day affair. I'm assuming they'll be tailgating if that's permitted outside, which it's Nebraska, so I'm kind of assuming it is. But this is just an all day event, which would explain why it's being called Volleyball Day and not Nebraska versus Omaha. So why we're bringing this up, tickets went on sale yesterday for season ticket holders and today for the general public to purchase online, in person, over the phone, any way you would get your tickets to a match normally. They did put a ticket limit on, which I thought was very smart in Nebraska. It was 12 tickets per party. The tickets ran for $25.
That's awesome.
I feel like that's a bang for your buck.
Oh yeah.
And then it's only $5 for high school age and younger. Wow. And I thought that was so cool because those are the young players who these matches impact the most.
Oh yeah.
So to be able to make it super accessible for them to go, I thought was a really cool thing. The tickets grant access to both matches and then the concert, as mentioned. So one notable thing, the stadium holds around 85,000 people. They're anticipating over 40,000 people. That's what they're anticipating. That's the number that's being thrown around. So the previous record for the most attended game in college volleyball was in early 2022, Wisconsin versus Florida, which took place in the Kohl Center in Madison, Wisconsin. The Kohl Center holds it says 17,230 people.
Yeah.
And Wisconsin volleyball had 16,833 people. So almost sold out the Kohl Center. Yeah. So they're anticipating 40,000 people. So Nebraska's not looking to break Wisconsin's record. They're looking to shatter it into a million pieces. Like, this would be mind blowing. I hope that when more information comes out about this, they're releasing how many tickets have been sold to kind of like build the anticipation, because I would be dying to know.
Yeah.
Hey guys, sorry to interrupt your stream. Liv and I actually recorded this on Wednesday. Today is Thursday, and it was just announced that Nebraska sold out Memorial Stadium. Sold out. Over 82,000 tickets were sold, and over 82,000 people will be at Volleyball Day in Nebraska. They have shattered records. So we recorded this the day before that was announced, while tickets were still being sold. They sold over 82,000 tickets in 48 hours. So just wanted to put that update in there, and we'll talk about it again next week.
It's going to be a spark to so much that the volleyball world and community is going to do. Like, I imagine there's going to be more schools trying to do things similar to this, because it's going to go off so well. Like, I already know that there's going to have so much success with this. Like, Nebraska, again, is a volleyball school. They've already had so much success in their program, and their fans are so loyal that it's just, I know it's going to go off without a hitch and going to be just amazing. So I think once schools see that, more people are going to try to do things out of the norm and unique to get more attention to volleyball.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think it's already been really competitive with, I'm pretty sure that the most viewed game in terms of like television, like people tuning in, was Wisconsin versus Nebraska. I think it was the Big Ten championship, or not the national championship that year. Yeah. And teams have advertised trying to break other teams' records.
Yeah.
So it's a big deal. I mean, it's a big deal to not only be the holder of these records, but to advertise like, hey, 17,000 people attended this Wisconsin game. How can we get 20,000 people? And, like, when you're putting these numbers out, it's kind of making people who aren't in the volleyball realm be like, 17,000 people went to that game? Like, you're kind of like, what? And so I think that's like the important part of like throwing these record numbers out there, is that people who aren't like us, where we're like, duh, of course they did. Yeah. Like, that's not shocking at all. Yeah. It's not shocking Nebraska sells out every home. We're like, yeah. But for people who aren't understanding the impact and the growth that this game has that's just crucial.
Yeah, I also think it's important when they do kind of the comparisons too, of like, okay, so 17,000 people for the Kohl Center. That's where Wisconsin basketball plays. So then you compare, okay, men's basketball and women's volleyball. You know that men's basketball tends to be in the college realm, more watched or viewed or more popular. So like then you kind of compare the two, and you're like, oh, so they almost sold out the Kohl Center, which sells out however much during the year. So now Nebraska is doing that with their football stadium. Is going to be like, we're going to fill this stadium with volleyball fans, and then we're going to compare that to how many football fans we can get in here. And I think once people see that, they're going to be like, oh my God. Like, that's what's, I feel like, is going to really make people mind blown, is when you do those comparisons to the big sporting events, and it's just volleyball. Like, it's just volleyball, but it's volleyball compared to football. It's kind of cool to see it, because I think people have a better understanding when they see it that way.
Yeah, I agree. It's very similar to, I see a lot of comparison to, I think it was the Final Four games for women's college basketball has received more views than any NBA game this year. I mean, like pre-playoffs. But I just think that, when you're seeing it, not necessarily that I love the comparison between like men and women, but it has to be talked about, because I don't think people fully understand the impact that seeing, players like Caitlin Clark, and when you're so young and you love the game so much because you just love the game, and you haven't really thought about all the logistics to playing in college and all the shit that comes with it. You're just kind of like, I love playing basketball. I love playing volleyball. To be able to like turn on the TV and put a game on, that's like life or death sometimes for some young girls. Cause it's like, I could be playing on TV.
Yeah.
You know, like, but if you're not making that accessible, it's harder to do so. So I agree. I think seeing those comparisons, it's like, man, like I mean, and it's also, you have men and women tuning in to watch the women's college basketball tournament. I mean, you have so many influential, you know, and even seeing like Dave Portnoy tweeting about these games and tweeting about players, you're like, okay, like, so the owner of the largest sports media company, arguably, right now is tweeting about the women's college basketball tournament and not any NBA games happening, right? You know, so like when you're seeing that, you're like, wow, like maybe I should tune in. And the more people that tune in, the more airtime they get, and that's how everyone wins.
Yep, exactly. So
yeah, it's so I love it. Really I can't wait. I would do anything to go. I would do anything to have the money to go.
I know.
Please, Nebraska, if you see this, please send us out.
Send us 2 free tickets.
Yeah, that would be awesome. I mean, the tickets aren't the problem. It's getting to Nebraska that is probably the problem. But
yeah,
who knows? Maybe we could get there before they sell out.
Yeah.
All right, cool. So yeah, it really is. So that's the housekeeping stuff we have. So let's dive into our recruiting process. So Liv and I really have been kind of racking our brains around what personal experiences we've had that could help people listening, or, you know, whether you're a parent, whether you're a player, whether you've experienced it, like just kind of bringing light to these conversations. These are conversations that we've had with each other plenty of times, we've had with other close friends. But I think it's helpful to talk about it and give out some of our tips and tricks of things that we've learned. And again, these were our experiences, so take that with a grain of salt. It's different for everybody. And I was getting recruited 6-7 years ago. So the way recruiting is done is also quite different than it was. I sound like my mom, like, I wasn't sending VHS tapes in, but I was sending DVDs. So, you know, take it how it is. So we'll kick that off a little bit. I don't know, Liv, if you want to get started kind of talking about what like early stages kind of looked like for you, or what steps you kind of took to kind of put yourself out there.
Yeah, well, I first wanted to ask you, because I don't know if I've ever asked you, when did you know you wanted to play college volleyball?
That's a very good question. So I only played one sport my whole life. I ran track in 6th grade because all my friends did it, and quickly realized that's not for me. And in 6th grade is when I started playing volleyball. I did track, but that's when I started club volleyball as well. And it was, I played it at like a really small club because I wasn't sure if I really liked it or not. And then in 7th grade, I switched to Rockford volleyball, and I got put on the top team. And so I was like, oh, maybe I'm kind of good, whatever that means when you're you're in 7th grade. And then by the time I got to 8th grade, I think I just kind of realized that I was playing a sport that I was good at naturally, and that I wanted to be the best at. I think that was kind of my mentality. And I connected really deeply with my mom playing volleyball. So I think I liked having that conversation with her all the time. I liked having that connection to her. And then after my freshman year of high school, now keep in mind, I went to a very small high school, so this isn't like the biggest deal ever, but I made varsity as a freshman and played all 4 years on varsity. So after I made varsity as a freshman, I think that's when it set in that I was kind of like, okay, I know I'm only playing volleyball, and if I can do this, like, I think I'm just going to commit to it and work really hard at it. And it just kind of gave me that reassurance that I would be good enough to play at some level in college if I put enough work into it. So probably like my freshman year of high school, I would say. And then I think in middle school is when I realized this was going to be the only sport I'm ever going to play, because I never had an interest in basketball. And softball took place during club season, and I was happiest during club season. So so I knew in middle school volleyball is the only sport I wanted to play. And then I think after I made varsity and had a pretty successful freshman year, in school and club. I was like, okay, I think I'm gonna put the work in to try to do this.
Yeah.
What about you? What does yours look like?
Well, I have an older sister, obviously. She played D2 volleyball at Winona State, and she's 4 years older than me. So I was trailing behind her and had her to watch. So she started playing volleyball when she was in 7th grade. I don't know what year, 13. So it would have been like 9. And then I started club when I was 12, so 6th grade. And that's when we started like volleyball at school. But I was also doing like 6 other sports at that time. I was dancing still. I was playing basketball. I was doing track.
Oh my God.
I was
doing you were a dancer.
Yeah. And so I was doing it all. But then when I was 12, I tried out for a small local club team that my sister was on the year prior. So and I made the 13s team. I made the 12s team, and then they asked me to try out for 13, so move up a grade or a level. And so then I went and tried out, and then I made it. But they're like, you can't tell everyone you're 12. Like, they just didn't want people, like the 13-year-old girls to know that I was playing up, because they didn't want them to feel bad. It was kind of weird, but I was like, whatever. So the whole time I was lying about my, like, saying like, oh yeah, I'm in 7th grade. And people would be like, oh, do you know this person? I'm like, no. They're like, oh, that's weird. They go to the same school as you. I was like, oh yeah, I know them. Yeah. But I think once I got to like then 7th grade, I played at that same club. And I think that's kind of when I knew I wanted to pursue volleyball fully. That's when I had to make a choice of what sport I wanted to stick with and do. I had to choose one, and I chose volleyball. And at that point, so I would have been like 13, my sister was 17, so she was being recruited at that time and looking to play college. And so I think from there, I knew that I also wanted to. So I'd probably say about 7th grade, 13 years old. And then when I was in 8th grade, 14, I switched clubs to Milwaukee Sting, so a more competitive club. But then that same year, I tore my ACL at like our second tournament. So that was, so I had that, which was hard. But then the next year, I started my recruiting process, because I knew I luckily had my sister to kind of follow suit and learn from her mistakes of like, you should have started earlier. You should have been contacting coaches at this time and whatnot. So I think when I was 15, I started reaching out and emailing college coaches. I had no idea where I wanted to go. I think I probably sent out like over 200 emails to these random colleges that I thought I wanted to go to. That sounded fun. But at the same time, I like knew the career path that I wanted to go into, but also didn't. So until I solidified that, which was probably my sophomore year of high school, then I was able to kind of do a better deep dive as to what schools I wanted to go to. So I would say my like legitimate recruiting process started when I was 15.
Yeah, I think mine was about the same. I think I started it when I was a sophomore and then really hit the ground running year, because my sophomore club season, we were very successful and I had a lot of fun and I grew a lot between my freshman year and my sophomore year. And so I think after my sophomore club season, I was like, okay, I actually think I can do this. Like in my freshman year, I was like, I want to do this. And then after sophomore year, I was like, okay, I think I can do this.
Yeah.
So that's, I think going into my junior year is when I really hit it hard. Started doing film, sort of. My mom hired a company to take some film video and put a video together, put it up on YouTube. I think we still burned it on a couple discs, but
that's not really that. I didn't burn any discs.
I think we did. I think it was like the company just, that's like how they ran it. So, but yeah, I think YouTube was that was probably, but I think the most crucial part of my recruiting process was big club tournaments. Yeah. And up until I started communicating with Platteville, I didn't realize how many coaches were walking around qualifiers and nationals, and even sometimes, I mean, because the Windy City League, like I've talked about, was so competitive that sometimes there'd be coaches there that were local. But really, I mean, like those tournaments, like those big qualifiers, I just loved them so much. I thought they were so fun that I was just happy to be there and like wasn't really paying attention to who was actually there, until I started talking to Platteville. But I think that was like more of a crucial part than sending my video out, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, I did a couple visits with some different universities that just didn't feel like the right fit. In person, I communicated with quite a few coaches. I knew I was probably going to stick at the small D2 or the D3 level. I was like, I'm 5'9", I'm not playing Division One volleyball. That just wasn't in the cards for me, which is fine. So I think that made it a little bit easier, but I had no idea where I wanted to go or what I wanted to do with my life. That was the hardest part for me, is I just didn't know where I wanted to go to school.
Yeah. I think the hardest part for me, well, I also did video. My mom would video me, I think starting in like sophomore year, just compiling, and then I would edit my own videos and put them on YouTube. And then I was just, like I said, sending emails, like this copy paste, send it to this school, just to, with like my club schedule, so that if they were happened to be there, they could come and watch me and stuff like that, just to get some exposure. But definitely when I was a junior, I hit the ground running a lot more and trying to figure out more of what I wanted to do. And I think my biggest struggle was having my sister. It's like she was great in helping me figure it out, but also it was kind of bad because I was getting looked at by, like, she played D2. So I was like, oh, I could also play D2. I could play D1 maybe as a libero. And I was being told that. So then I was like, okay, well, those are my goals. But then when I wasn't like getting all of the responses or the contacts from them, I was like, oh, I'm worse than my sister. Or then my dad was like, oh, well, go to Winona State where Lauren went and talk with the coach. And I was like, but I don't want to go there. And so I felt like there was a lot of pressure to be like at the same or better level than my sister. And like to this day, I'm like, oh yeah, she played D2, I played D3, even though like we were in the most competitive conference for D3, which was basically playing D2 to some extent. But at that age, it was a really hard concept for me to grasp because everyone always told me I was a better like all-around player than my sister. So then not seeing it at like the college level and at that next level of like the divisions was hard for me to understand that like we can still be comparable players or one can be better than the other, but like where we were at, what schools we went to doesn't necessarily determine that. And me being a 17-year-old girl who me and my sister at that time didn't like each other that much, it was hard for me. So it was very, I butt heads with my parents a lot when it came to the recruiting process. And I think that was kind of a downfall for me. But then once I knew that I wanted to go into like the criminal justice forensic science career path, that narrowed down a lot of my choices because not a lot of schools have what I wanted to do. But the ones that did have it were far away. Like I went and recruited and was being recruited by a school in Alaska. Like me and my dad went on a visit to Alaska Anchorage. They were a D2 school. We were there for a day. I was being looked at by a school in Alabama that we went to visit. I think 2 schools in Alabama. I was being looked at by a bunch of schools in Wisconsin. And I didn't stumble across Platteville until the very, very end, like the last few months of my recruiting process.
I found, so my experience with Platteville is strange for my recruiting. So I hated the idea of leaving home to go to college. And anyone who watches this that knows me knows it was just, it's hard. I think I'm a homebody. I went to a small school. So I was graduating with kids I've known my whole life. I've, felt comfortable there, and it's a scary step. And I never felt confident in what I wanted to do with my life. So I think that made me a little insecure during this process as well. But I put off picking a college for a long time. So I heard of Platteville through a friend who was going there at the time, and I had never heard of it. And it's literally the School of Engineering. So like, why would I, pay attention? But at the time, my childhood best friend Nev was also looking at colleges. She's your age, she's younger than me. So she was like, hey, why don't we go check it out? So I applied, I got accepted in October. And when I got I hadn't done any volleyball stuff yet, but I got accepted into the university, and I was like, I kind of got like a giddy feeling sort of like that I hadn't with other schools I'd been accepted into. And so I was like, okay. So in December, Christmas break, Nev and I and our moms drove up to Platteville and did the tour, as much as we could, really. It was like the dead of winter. But we were just walking around, and I just remember feeling very comfortable. I liked the size, I liked the feeling I had there. But they didn't have a head coach at the time that I was there for my first visit. So I met with the assistant coach at the time. Her name was Yvette Updike. I remember her clear as day. She was so kind, so welcoming. My parents, we loved her. She was just very excited for me to be there. It was like a really good foot to start on. And so obviously we went through the whole, we don't have a head coach yet. So I didn't get to do like an official sit down visit. I didn't get to meet with girls on the team. Like I didn't get to really do any of that. So then fast forward, I went back when they hired the head coach now, and she had come and seen me play at a big tournament. So she wanted to continue my recruiting process that had started with Yvette. And I went and I met with her. I did the team lunch. I did the locker room, the gym, the whole sit down in the office, like the whole shebang. We went over the film, whatever, just talked. And when we left, we got in the car at the field house. I remember exactly where we were at in the parking lot because that's like burned in my front. Like I remember it so clear as day. We sat down in the car and I was like, Mom, I want to go to college here. And that was a very big moment for me because I think my mom was like thinking she was gonna have to like literally kick me out of the house to go to college. And so that kind of wrapped my recruiting process up in, without much detail. But it was a long time coming. I actually got the notification I committed to Platteville 6 years ago yesterday.
Oh my God.
Yeah, which is crazy. Yeah. It was a big deal. I remember getting the phone call. She offered it, she had offered it to me while we were in Platteville. I remember, and I sat on it for a couple of days and then called her back. And it just felt like that was the place that I was supposed to be.
Wow. How Platteville came to me was very different. So at some point in my recruiting process, I signed up for NCSA, which is Next College Student Athlete, which is a big recruiting company and website, essentially. They have like these recruiting coaches, and they kind of help you pick the school or help you get your videos and emails out to coaches to help get recruited. So we had signed up for it, and I was using that a lot. And on the bottom, I remember you would like put all this information, like how big of a school, how far away from home, like your interests and all this stuff. And I remember like it would give you like a percentage of how compatible or like closest to what you wanted was. And Platteville was like 98%, but I knew it was D3, so I kept ignoring it. And I never reached out to them until my cousin and her husband. So my cousin, her husband was one of the football coaches at Platteville. So I think my junior year, he had gotten a job there and they moved there. And so then they knew the head coach and were kind of talking about me and like, oh, my cousin is a volleyball player. She's looking to be recruited and blah, blah, blah. And so then they were bugging me. Oh, look at Platteville, blah, blah, blah. So I finally like reached out, and I don't really know, I can't remember how it went, but coach came to one of my practices at Sting because
practice?
Yeah. And this was my 18th year. So this was like January of my 18th year club season. So again, my 18th year was kind of strange. It was a group of 10 of us, but we only practiced once a week. And then we did smaller tournaments and things like that. Just to all of the girls except for me and one other girl were already committed to like a D1 school or a D2 school. So like they already knew where they were going. Just me and one other girl still had to decide if we were going to play or not. So coach came to a practice. This was our second practice as a team because of snow days and bad weather and things like that. So I didn't know like half of these girls, and it was a horrible practice. Like I didn't know them. I was so uncomfortable. I was so nervous to mess up because there was no one really in the gym at the time. Like it was this huge center, and me, like my team and maybe one other team were practicing. So it was like no one. And coach is just sitting there watching me. I'm like, this is terrifying. Awful practice. She talks to my coach, and then talks with me and was like, yeah, so like we'll be in touch. And that was that. And I was like, oh my God, like that was awful. Never gonna talk to her again. And so then she called me, and at that moment she was like, you know, we can't offer you a spot on our team, but we can offer you like a tryout spot. And in my head, I'm like, hell no. Like, you're a D3 school. I'm not trying out for your team. I was like, I had all these opinions and whatever. So then I talked to my coach, Ted, who, bless his soul, he helped me get to where I am with college volleyball and things. He then called up coach and was like, you made a huge mistake, and kind of called her out for like basically dropping me as a recruit, and was like, you have to understand that this is her second practice with this team. We have an unconventional way, a way of this team, like how it's built and things like that. He's like, come to our tournament in the Dells, whenever that was, like a few weeks later. So she came, and I don't know, I had a good game. And at that time I was playing 6 rotations outside. And I remember we were at the Just a Game Center, so the JAG, and I saw her walk in, and I was like, why is she here? I was so mad. I was like, already kind of had this bitter taste because of what she told me. And I didn't know that my coach had called her and like invited her to watch me again. So I was like, why is she here? Like, come on. Had a great match. And then she was able to talk with me and was like, I don't say this very often. And this is true. She's like, I don't say this very often, but you 100% proved me wrong. And gave me an offer right there.
Dude, you should have had to put that in writing.
I know I should have. So then I
was laughing because you said just the way it started out. It's just funny to me. Like, yeah, know, that may be the story for another time, but that's perfect.
Yeah. So then she gives me an offer. We're at this tournament, and I was like, you know, like I gotta think things through, whatever. So then, I don't know, a few weeks later, I went. No, that was. I might be getting my times mixed up. I don't know. But
did you not do one of the ID camps?
I did once I was committed.
Okay. I remember that.
Yeah, but now I'm like, I think I'm getting my timelines mixed up. So maybe that was in like November. Maybe that was in November, because that would make more sense. Because then I didn't do like a visit. So because my cousins were there, and my one cousin was a football coach, they took me on like a little tour, and my visit was watching one of Platteville's games. They had a home match, and I went to watch. And I was there with my cousins. And then after the match, we were going to go and talk with coach. So we did that. And we were in coach's office. And again, my cousin was a football coach there. So he walks into coach's office, and him and coach know each other. But coach didn't know that we were related. So he walks in and is like, "Hey, family." And she's like, "Get out of here. Like, this is a recruit." He's like, "Yeah, she's my cousin." It was just really funny. So then from then forward, she offered me it and all this stuff. But I didn't decide until the next spring. So that's coming spring. I think I had 2 days to decide, like 2 days left of the recruiting time frame or whatever. And it was my spring break. So I was going on spring break with my family and at my high school best friend's family. And we were in the airport going to Belize. And it was like 20 minutes before our flight. And I called coach and told her that I was committing. And she screamed so loud in the phone. I was like, she busted my eardrum. But yeah, I waited till the last second to decide because I was deciding between there and a school in Alabama. Between the two. And this one in Alabama was a D2 school.
So I can't remember. Well, first I want to say, because again, just to reiterate, I'm a year older than Liv. So I was a freshman when you were coming to the game. And I love this stuff, but it's so crazy to think that I was sitting on the bench for sure, but like I'm sitting there on the team, and like my best friend's soulmate is in the stands thinking here, and like we didn't even know each other yet. Like that is so crazy for me to think about. It makes me so happy. Meanwhile, I was probably like suffering a little on the inside, but it's fine. So did you do like a recruiting lunch or anything like that with players, or no?
No,
I couldn't remember because I did so many of those my freshman and sophomore year that they're all blur. I don't remember. But I remember doing one. I remember Maddie Dower was there, Ashley was there, Sarah was there, Jessie I think was there, girls that we ended up playing with. And I mean, I was at Maddie's wedding last fall. Like it's crazy, but I do remember that we ate in Bridgeway, Bridgeway Commons, and I do remember all of that. My mom
remember
ate
running
with us
to the bathroom instantly after eating Bridgeway.
Yeah, little did I know I was going to be consuming so much food there. But yeah, I was just curious. I can never remember. So what would you say, looking back, what's one regret you have, or like a piece of advice that you would maybe do differently? And then what's something that you're glad you did the way you did?
Yeah. As a whole, I think that's a really good question. I think whenever I was on a visit, I was like petrified. And so I don't think I like broke out of my shell and really was able to like try and make a connection with the coaches or the players that I did meet. Like I was afraid to ask questions. Like I thought I knew all of the answers because my sister. And so I was like, oh, well, anything I can just ask her. So in a way, I feel like I didn't let myself open up to the idea of making that connection to help me decide a little bit better. I would say that was probably my biggest regret, not asking as many questions as I should have, because I think it would have helped me in the long run kind of make my decision faster and be able to understand kind of what I was getting into in all the different situations and stuff. What I'm happy I did with my recruiting process is I'm glad I did visit so many schools. I mean, I'm sure people have visited way more than I did. I think I visited about 6 schools, like actual like recruiting visits. And I think that helped me even though it was a lot and it took a lot of time, I think it really helped me narrow down and decide what I liked and what I didn't like. Because if I didn't do that, if I didn't go to Alaska and look at that school, or I didn't go down to Alabama or go to Green Bay, I wouldn't have been able to kind of figure out what my perfect spot was. And so when I went to Platteville, finally, I was like, this is it. This is what I wanted. This is what I've been looking for. All of those other schools had pieces of it, but this has all of those pieces. And so I think if I only like visited 2 schools, I don't think I would have truly found the right school for me.
Yeah. It's crazy. Like it's real, that feeling you're talking about. Like it's real.
Yeah.
Like I mean, I live my life based on the way my gut feels, but like I was walking around that campus, and this was someone who, like, I did not want to leave my hometown to go to college. I wanted to go to college at home, and walking around there and then going back for a second visit, and the way I felt getting in the car, it's a real feeling, and it's important to listen to your gut and not try to make it work. Like, you could have tried to make it work so you could say you played D2, but maybe you would have ended up at a university where you just weren't happy.
Exactly.
You know, it's crazy to think about. I think my biggest regret is not reaching out more. I think it's, when you're 15, 17, even 18 for some people, like, I just remember being scared of rejection because that meant I wasn't good enough, and volleyball meant so much to me, and I wanted to be so good at it. I put so much work into it. So it was hard. I think it was intimidating almost for me to reach out to different universities, no matter what division they were at, and just like, hey, I'd love if you would take some time to check this out. Here's some information about myself. Here's my schedule. The idea of that, even if it was over email or through a website, was just very scary because the rejection was hard. Yeah. So especially at that age, it felt so life or death. I think so. My biggest regret's not putting myself out there more and not taking a little bit more risks with it out of fear of rejection. Because I think later in my college career, when I'm starting job interviews, that's just part of it. It's part of the process. It's part of, helping you get where you're going to end up. But it was scary at that age for sure. So that's probably my biggest regret that I would do differently. And then I think one thing that I'm glad I did the way I did is wait. I had opportunities my junior year, and I had opportunities early in my senior year of high school to commit places. And I just was like, I just feel like I need to wait for something better, which was scary because, like I said, I committed in April of my senior year of high school.
Same.
And I think, my process was tough because in a class of 4 freshmen, 3 of them were recruited by the previous head coach, and I was the only one that was committed under the current head coach. So that part was kind of hard too. So I'm glad I waited. I think waiting and knowing that when I got off the phone, I felt relief and like I was going to be in a good place. And I look back on it with so, as hard as everything was in terms of volleyball there, I look back with such gratitude because Platteville has such a special place in my heart. So I think waiting for it and letting my gut and my heart tell me that's where I wanted to go, as crazy as it sounds, was the right choice to make. And I look back at that with a lot of gratitude. And I'm proud of my 17-year-old self for trusting my gut in a decision so big, putting so much money and commitment and everything into it. So I think that's one thing I look back on with like a lot of gratitude at that age too, especially. But it's crazy. It's an overwhelming process. It's really hard to stay on track a little bit, because during all this, I just remember being like, I'm a senior in high school. Like, I want to worry about prom, I don't want to be, and where I'm gonna go for spring break. Like, I don't want to be worried about where I'm gonna go to college. Like, that just never really was my mindset. But yeah, it's stressful, and the fear of rejection is real.
Yeah, it was hard junior year with everything, like, you know, taking your ACT or SATs or whatnot and trying to choose a college and then playing volleyball. It's a lot. And it's kind of crazy to think, like you were saying, like you were happy that you waited. And I'm too very happy that I took so long to make my decision, because I truly believe that I made the right choice. But now everyone's pushing kids to start the recruiting process earlier and earlier and earlier, like in 7th and 8th grade. And it's like, okay, they can start looking, but they shouldn't be making that decision when you're 13 years old. You have no idea what you want. Yeah, it sounds great and it sounds amazing to be going to this big D1 school, but how are they supposed to know? I barely even know what I want to do now. How are they supposed to know at the age of 13? And there's a lot of opinions when you do make that decision so young. There's a lot of voices trying to tell you what to do or where you should go. And at some point, it almost feels like it's not their decision. Like, oh, it's my coaches, or oh, it's my parents, or oh, it's this or that. It's like, but where do you want to go? What do you want to do?
Yeah.
Because I think that was a big thing for me. Like, I was so strong-headed on my academics because, like, I knew what I wanted to do in my career, and I knew that there weren't a lot of schools. So yeah, I was being looked at by D1 as a libero. I was being looked at by D2 as libero outside. I was looking at D3. Like, I had a lot of options, but in the end, I chose my career path because I knew volleyball was going to end. And I don't think everyone has that same mentality all the time. And they're like, sports. But it's like, okay, well then what after sports? You know, like if you can play after and play professionally, that's awesome. But like, what about injuries? You know, you never know when you're going to get injured, and it's going to be a career-ending injury, and then you can't, and then you have to go based on your education, and it's not what you wanted to do. So I'm proud of my 17-year-old self for making my decision for the advancement of my career later on, because I know a lot of people that I played with may not have, and just wanted the big school's name on their back. And I guess that's like my biggest piece of advice to young athletes, is to follow your heart and trust your gut, but also like have a plan B in place. You know, like I said, sports, you can try to make it your whole life, but essentially it's not going to be your entire life. Like, it's not going to be your career for eternity. So like still go to a school where you can get a career or an education and a career path that you want to go down, because at some point you will have to, and you can't just bank on always being an athlete. Unfortunately, I wish we could, because that would be great. I wouldn't have to do all the stuff I'm doing now. But I think that would be my biggest piece of advice to
that's such a mature mindset too, because I think that gets overlooked during the recruiting process.
For sure.
I think my last piece of advice too, and I think this was something that we'll talk about more in detail eventually, but looking back on it as a player on the team, speaking to future recruits, my last piece of advice would be, really, as nervous as you are and as intimidating it is, really pay attention to the culture and the environment you're walking into. Like you said, when the recruiting process is starting when you're 13 or 14, like, that's scary. Like, you are so impressionable, so young. And I will forever be indebted to Platteville for the people, for my education ×2, for the experience, for the life I'm living right now. But there are a lot of things that I wish I could have had more time to pay attention to, whether that's the girls you're meeting, whether that's the environment of the gen pop around you, whether that's the environment of staff. You know, I think that goes into your point of really asking questions, because you're walking into the next 4 years, if you're not interested in entering the transfer portal, or if you are really focused on your education at a place. So that'd be my like kind of deep, dark piece of advice is
Yeah.
really kind of be on alert of things that you might be like,
Yeah.
maybe that's a little red, maybe that's a little bit of, I don't know.
For sure.
But also just like let it be fun. Like I think I
Yeah.
didn't have it. It wasn't as fun as it should have been for me until I was on campus and looking at the gym and looking at the locker. Like let it be fun. Like yes, it's intimidating. Yes, it's the next 4 years of your life. Yes, college is scary, but let it be a fun part of your life that you look back on and you're like, God, it was fun. It's supposed to be fun.
Yeah.
As well. So, but yeah, I really wish I would have been a little more on alert with a couple of things. Again, my experience was different because everything was happening really fast and everything was really new, in terms of everything happening in the program. So it was a little different for me, but there were a couple times sitting in recruiting visits, with young girls who were thinking about coming here, that I felt a little yucky almost, if that makes sense. So really pay attention and make sure you're, this makes it sound a lot easier than it is, but make sure you're choosing a place that you feel like if volleyball were to end tomorrow, you're still happy, because I would have been that at Platteville for sure.
Yeah, for sure. That's one thing my mom always said.
Yes, make sure you like the actual university that you are attending, because you're in class a lot more than you're in the gym. So make sure that, so yeah. But shout out UWP. I love you. I love you so much. All right, sweet. I think that was a great conversation. It's nice to talk about and look back on. And again, the recruiting process is probably quite different than when we were going through that, whether that's technology, whether that's, how many visits you're taking, it all looks different. But that was our experience and our regrets and our, little grateful pieces as well. So hopefully some people can take away from that what they will. So just before we head out, we are officially on social media now. Woo! Thank you, Liv, for setting us up. We are on TikTok and Instagram at StartingSixPodcast and on Twitter at StartingSixPod. So give it a follow along. Our TikTok game is already kind of strong. Not gonna lie. The views are kind of up. So be sure to check it out. And Liv and I really appreciate everyone who keeps subscribing and keeps watching. It means a lot to us. We love doing this with each other, especially. So thank you guys so much.
Thank you.